Welcome to Audit the Audit, where we sort out the who and what and the right and wrong of police interactions. This episode covers passenger identifications, obstruction, and consensual encounters, and is brought to us by Ambus99's YouTube channel. Be sure to check out the description below and give them the credit that they deserve. On September 3rd, 2014, the owner of the YouTube channel Ambus99, who we will refer to as Mr. Ambus, was a passenger in a vehicle driven by his friend somewhere in Rhode Island. The vehicle was pulled over by an officer from an unidentified police department for speeding, and the officer demanded ID from both the driver and Mr. Ambus. The driver supplied his license, but Mr. Ambus declined to give up his name or any identification.
Whatever the traffic stop was, it doesn't really matter. I'm not here for that, obviously.
Just in case I started recording, because
that's fine.
If anything, if I need it for court or anything.
You can record all you want, no problem. You're obligated when you're in a motor vehicle to present your ID.
When you're driving?
When you're in the motor vehicle, yes, like right now.
Can I see what law is that?
I don't have the law book on me. I know the law.
So if you know it, how come?
If you weren't in the car and you parked in a parking lot, no. But as far as the motor vehicle being operated, yes.
Right. So get the law for me. Give me what law it is, and then.
Law for you.
You're a police officer. You're supposed to know all the laws and
Let me talk to you. Step out of the car for me.
I'm not stepping out of the car.
What's that?
I'm not stepping out of the car for my safety.
For your safety?
For my safety.
What do you think? We're going to beat you up?
No, but once you tell somebody to step out of the car, it's either they're being arrested, you're going to take them in for questioning or something like that. Okay. If I'm not going to be... Listen. I'd rather stay here where this is recording in case something happens.
Mr. Lawyer, okay?
No, I told him I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer.
Attorney.
But I value my rights. I have rights. I know the Constitution. I know what rights I have.
You do it with every single car. You give up your rights when you're in the car.
When you're driving.
When you're driving.
When you're driving.
You have to present your ID.
Yeah, when you're driving.
If you don't have your ID, that's fine. But you got to give them a name.
The officers tell Mr. Ambus that he is legally obligated to present his identification to the police during a traffic stop, regardless of whether or not he is the driver. While the Supreme Court has yet to specifically rule on whether the police can demand ID from a passenger during a routine traffic stop, the court's precedent does make it clear that individuals generally cannot be required to identify themselves absent reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. In the 1979 case of Brown versus Texas, the Supreme Court overturned a conviction under a Texas statute requiring individuals to identify themselves because the officers involved in the case lacked any reasonable suspicion to believe that the individual they detained was engaged or had engaged in criminal conduct. For this reason, the court held that the application of the statute to require him to identify himself violated the Fourth Amendment and that he could not be punished for refusing to identify himself. Relying heavily on this decision, as well as the 2004 Supreme Court case of Hybel versus 6th Judicial District Court of Nevada, which upheld the constitutionality of a stop and identify law that required suspects to disclose their names in the course of a valid Terry stop, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals concluded in the 2019 case of U.S. versus Landeros that officers cannot lawfully order passengers to identify themselves absent particularized and independent reasonable suspicion that the passenger has committed an offense, and that they cannot extend a traffic stop if a passenger refuses to identify themselves. Similarly, in the 2006 case of United States versus Henderson, the First Circuit Court of Appeals, which includes Rhode Island, determined that extending a traffic stop to perform a criminal background check on a passenger violated the Fourth Amendment when the officer did not have any particularized reason to suspect him of dangerousness or wrongdoing. While Section 12-7-1 of the Rhode Island General Laws states that, quote, a peace officer may detain any person abroad whom he or she has reason to suspect is committing, has committed, or is about to commit a crime, and may demand of the person his or her name, address, business abroad, and destination. In this case, there's nothing to indicate that Mr. Ambus was involved in criminal activity. Therefore, it is likely that a court would hold that the officers violated the Fourth Amendment by prolonging the traffic stop when Mr. Ambus refused to provide identification.
I'm not giving out my name just because. Because you're going to start, I need your name, I need your date of birth, you're going to look me up, you're going to have my address, you're going to have all the information. Yeah, but what crimes did I commit?
He didn't say you committed any, did he?
No one's saying we do it with every single car.
Yep.
As far as you getting out of the car, I know you're thinking you're Joe Attorney.
No, I don't think that. I don't think that.
If you're going to get arrested, you're going to get arrested. Yeah. Okay, you're not.
All right, so when you say I'm being arrested, then we'll take it from there.
Why would I say that? Why would I say you're being arrested? If
I don't
you're
know.
Sitting in the passenger
Yeah,
seat
because you're asking me for my
minding
name, my date of birth.
your business. That's just for our safety. That's why we do that.
Yeah, but why did he get pulled over? Right?
Had him for speeding.
Okay, so that's his problem.
Yeah, but
I'm just getting the ride home.
listen, but you're in the car, okay?
Yeah, but I didn't commit a crime. I didn't
We're
speed.
not saying that you did. We identify everyone in the car.
You're not
Every
listening
single
to
car
me.
stop.
I am listening.
Okay. When you get out of the car, okay, we don't just arrest people to get out of the car. We just don't tell you to get out for the heck of it, okay? For our safety, we ask for ID. Now you're obligated by the state to do that, okay?
All right, so whatever you got to do, but I'm not giving up my rights. I'm not giving up my rights. And I know that's not a law. Once you tell me the law, what number it is, everything, we're going to look it up,
It is
stuff
a law,
like
but
that.
I'll be right back. I'll
All
be
right.
right back. Where are you guys from?
Providence?
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 That's it.
Yes.
Down at Quonset? All right. Hey, can you hop off just for a minute? I just want to talk to you real quick.
Nah, I want to stay with the camera recording because I don't know, I don't want to be,
Feel free to bring
Yeah.
your camera with you.
I don't want to carry that and have it in your face,
Okay.
But,
Then you know what?
I don't want to be
Okay.
disrespectful. I don't want to take you guys away from doing your job and stuff. But they say that when you have rights, either you use them or you lose them,
You're not disrespectful, okay? But you are breaking the law.
I am.
Okay. The United States Supreme Court says that we have every right to take you out of this car while we conduct a traffic stop.
The officers inform Mr. Ambus that they are within their authority to order him from the vehicle. As we have often discussed on ATA, the Supreme Court has long held that an officer can order a passenger to exit a vehicle during a routine traffic stop, regardless of whether reasonable suspicion exists that the passenger was involved in a crime. The justification for this rule is officer safety, although there's no requirement that an officer identify any particular facts or circumstances that cause them to fear for their safety in order to demand that an individual exit a vehicle during a traffic stop. Under Rhode Island law, a citizen can be arrested for failing to follow a lawful order from a police officer, such as an order to exit the vehicle during a traffic stop. For instance, Section 31-12-3 of the Rhode Island General Laws states that, quote, "No person shall willfully fail or refuse to comply with any lawful order or direction of any police officer invested by law with authority to direct, control, or regulate traffic." Similarly, Section 11-32-1 of the Rhode Island General Law simply defines the offense of obstructing an officer as obstructing any officer while in the execution of his or her office or duty. Unlike many states that require that an individual physically obstruct an officer in an attempt to prevent them from executing a duty for an obstruction conviction to be sustained, Rhode Island does not impose this requirement. While Section 11-32-1 is vague as to what constitutes obstruction, in the 1979 case of Defusco versus Brophy, the Rhode Island Supreme Court interpreted the statute and defined the term to obstruct as, quote, "to interpose obstacles or impediments, to hinder, impede, or in any manner intrude or prevent," noting that, quote, "this term does not necessarily imply the employment of direct force or the exercise of direct means. This means that individuals can be convicted for both physical and non-physical acts of obstruction because, as the Defusco court explained, quote, "in certain circumstances, the spoken word can be just as effective in impeding an officer in the discharge of his duty as if the orator had grappled with the officer." Here, established Supreme Court precedent authorizes the officers to demand that Mr. Ambus exit the vehicle, even without an articulable reason to fear for their safety. Because Mr. Ambus refused to comply with this lawful order, a court would likely conclude the officers could have forced him out of the vehicle and arrested him for obstruction.
Even when I'm not being arrested, I wasn't driving, I don't have any probable cause, just with my friend, because he already got a ticket. He's late for, he's giving me a ride, as a courtesy, for me because my car broke down. I'll give you my ID, all right? Because I've been here for 31 years in this country, never been arrested, don't have any kind of...
I'm not arguing any of that stuff.
I don't have any records, everything's clean, So I'm going to reach for my ID, all right?
You go right ahead.
Just for my friend.
Yep.
I'll give up my rights for my friend.
Well, it has nothing to do with rights, my friend.
All right, here you go. You're not going to find anything. I just want to, when you have the rights, if you don't use it, you lose it. And that's where it's going in this country already.
You do have rights, and I understand that. I'm well versed in the Constitution.
Yeah, I follow.
You do have rights.
Yeah, I follow. I try to follow all the laws. I try to learn everything,
But you do have to identify yourself.
They say if you're being arrested, there's probable cause, or you're being a danger,
Probable cause.
We
Yeah,
don't
I-
know who you are as the passenger if you don't tell us. So.
Yeah, but I wasn't driving. I didn't commit any crime. There's no probable cause that I'm going to commit a crime. You didn't catch me in the act of committing a crime.
You know what I'm saying? We don't know who you are. The reason why we do that is obviously to check anybody, see if they have warrants or whatever. We don't know who the passenger is for our safety
Yeah, but
and yours.
you see what the problem with that is? You cannot just go around stopping everybody and asking for IDs like Nazi Germany. You know what I mean?
Vehicles legally stopped though for traffic violations.
Okay. And I don't have anything to hide or anything, but
I'm not saying that you do.
no, I don't know. But it seems like that when you want to give out your name and ID, it seems like there's all these red flags. What is he hiding?
You're one person. This case that this sergeant is talking about came from a state trooper asking for identification from a bus full of people. And the Supreme Court found that it was warranted.
The officer claims that they can demand identification from Mr. Ambus because the Supreme Court has ruled that a state trooper was within his authority to arbitrarily identify every person on a bus. It is possible that the officer is referring to the 1991 case of Florida versus Bostick, where the Supreme Court held that officers could routinely board buses to question passengers and request consent to search their luggage without violating the Fourth Amendment. The court reasoned that consensual encounters between officers and bus passengers were not considered seizures, and that the standard to determine if a seizure has occurred is whether, quote, a reasonable person would understand that he or she is free to refuse. The Supreme Court again addressed this issue in the 2002 case of United States versus Drayton, where Florida police officers boarded a bus and asked random passengers to consent to a search of their luggage. The court equated being a passenger on a bus with being present in a public place, and noted that, quote, law enforcement officers do not violate the Fourth Amendment's prohibition of unreasonable seizures merely by approaching individuals on the street or in other public places and putting questions to them if they're willing to listen. Based on this reasoning, the court held that, quote, even though law enforcement officers have no basis for suspecting a particular individual, they may pose questions, ask for identification, and request consent to search luggage, provided they do not induce cooperation by coercive means. In this situation, because it is inarguable that Mr. Ambus was being coercively detained and that the encounter was not consensual, these Supreme Court cases do not support the officer's argument that Mr. Ambus is required to identify himself. While the Bostick and Drayton decisions allow officers to consensually request identification in certain situations, they do not empower officers to demand identification from any passenger at any time, and they certainly do not authorize the detention or arrest of a passenger in a private vehicle who refuses to provide his identification when the officers have no reasonable suspicion that he has committed a crime.
They can ask for identification.
So even all those innocent people that were just there along for the ride, they have to go through all this hassle, give out the names, the date of birth, the social security, just because somebody else did something? We all have to pay for it?
The courts have said that we can.
All right. Now I'm just gonna, look that up. I'm not saying that you're lying, but I want to make sure for myself.
I don't lie to you.
Okay.
If you go on the Rhode Island
Too
State
many,
website,
like he says, too many lawyers online. They think they know everything, and then they tell you something that is not even
if you go on the
true.
Rhode Island State website, you can look up all the Rhode Island general laws.
Okay. Yeah, I have the phone number for the.
If you do a search on there of obstruction of justice, the entire definition of the statute will come up.
All right.
You'll see that.
And it's gonna say if you're a passenger on a car and you get asked for the ID.
It won't be that specific.
You see?
That comes
I want to see where it says that.
comes from case law.
After running Mr. Ambus's ID and finding no issues, the officers issued tickets to the driver and allowed them to leave. However, Mr. Ambus never got out of the vehicle. Very little information is available about this interaction, so it's unclear whether Mr. Ambus took any action following the encounter. Overall, the officers get a C, because although they maintained a professional demeanor throughout the encounter, they demonstrated a blatant misunderstanding of the law surrounding when officers can order individuals to identify themselves and unlawfully extended the traffic stop to coerce Mr. Ambus to turn over his identification. It is worth noting that the officers would have been within their authority to force Mr. Ambus from the vehicle or potentially even arrest him for obstruction, and I applaud them for exercising their discretion not to do so. However, this does not make up for the fact that they violated the Fourth Amendment rights of Mr. Ambus and the driver of the vehicle by extending the traffic stop without reasonable, articulable suspicion of a crime. In this interaction, the officers exhibited a complete misinterpretation of Supreme Court case law and the scope of authority to identify individuals without their consent, which makes it highly likely that Mr. Ambus was not and will not be the only citizen whose rights they have violated. This encounter is an excellent example of the importance of clear and accurate legal training for officers, and how, when officers do not know and understand the law, they are likely to trample the rights of citizens without even realizing it. Mr. Ambus gets an A, because even though he did not exit the vehicle when the officers ordered him to, he remained calm and cordial throughout the encounter, tactfully but assertively refused to provide his identification when the officers demanded it, and respectfully attempted to educate the officers about the law. In this encounter, Mr. Ambus demonstrated why it is vital for citizens to know and understand their rights and confidently assert them when officers violate the Constitution. Although Mr. Ambus ultimately did provide his identification out of respect to his friend who was driving him, it is perfectly understandable why he did so. And because Mr. Ambus is not an auditor or a constitutional activist, it makes sense that he would eventually comply with the officer's unlawful demands and move on with his life. I commend Mr. Ambus for having the courage to express dissent when faced with unconstitutional police action and the self-control to do so calmly and respectfully. This incident easily could have escalated into a physical encounter, and it is clear that Mr. Ambus's demeanor contributed greatly to the peaceful nature in this interaction. Let us know if there is an interaction or legal topic you would like us to discuss in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out my second channel for even more police interaction content.